Hello, welcome everybody that's watching. I will be interviewing Richard Nicholson today for the Solutions podcast. And it's exciting because Richard and me have not actually ever met before. So this is the first person I've interviewed that I've not really met IRL in real life. So yes, I think it's very exciting what you've been working on. So I'll hand over to you to explain what you've been working on.
Well, Nicola, thank you very much for the invite to talk today. So much appreciated. So basically, what we've been doing is trying to nudge forwards a green agenda within our local town area, Haywards Heath Town, as a councillor. So this process started, in 2019, when I was officially a paper candidate for town council election. I was assured by the local party that it was unlikely that anyone was going to get elected, and I was misinformed. So at the town council election, I ended up with one other Green councillor participating in the local town council. So the question was, well, okay, we're here, what are we going to do? And I don't know if it's partly because of my scientific background or the industry I've worked in, but we decided to take a very methodological approach to sort of working what we could do locally. And one of the first resources I came across when sort of scouting the internet as to perhaps good basis for a framework was the Drawdown Project. And the thing I liked about the Drawdown Project was, well, it was a very credible scientific base. And what they were doing was looking at what were the things you could do to actually reverse and draw down CO2 globally. And it was research that was kept updated, and they kept shifting the analysis and all of this sort of stuff. And so the conversation locally was, look, if we're going to do anything, let's base it on the science. Let's use Drawdown Project as a basis for that. And then the conversation turned to, okay, so some of these are really big themes and there's nothing we can do. But some of the things are local and we can do. So let's look at the priority in terms of impact from Drawdown and filter out what we can potentially do locally to make an impact for our residents and to sort of change behaviour and move forwards. And so it very quickly came to the realisation that there were really only two or three things we could do. One was encourage a change in food waste behaviour, and this is at the end of the pipeline, right? So this food waste is a problem all the way through, from production in the field through to waste on the plate. But what we can do is look at how we can address the end of pipeline waste. Perhaps we can do something locally with businesses and with schools to increase awareness. And since the announcement went out, we've been contacted by one or two organisations that have schemes in this area. So we're starting to look into that over the next couple of months as to how we can sort of accelerate that understanding. The other one was plant-based diet. So, and we know this was going to be quite sort of controversial, but the science is the science. And so we thought, well, what we want to do is explain and make people aware that the dietary choices have a massive impact on the climate. So if you're concerned about climate change and you're concerned about, the environment, well, one of the things you can do, which is most impactful at home as an individual, as a family, is to change your dietary choices. And the net benefit of that is not only for the climate, but from a health perspective and from a cost perspective as well. So we decided early this year, we sort of got delayed by a couple of years because of COVID and all sorts of things that needed to happen in the town council. But at the start of this year, the decision was made to sign up for Veganuary for the month, just to signpost that. And then following on from that, the decision was made to sign up to the plant-based treaty, partly to give us some of the formalism within what we wanted to do locally with respect to driving forward this messaging. So the impact of that, the feedback from that's been quite interesting. We've had some fairly irate feedback from some parts of the community.
I was just about to ask you there, how's it actually been taken locally? Because I mean, that's the trouble, isn't it? People think, oh, well, these vegans are these skinny hippies, and how we get this actually into the mainstream for people to kind of realize that it is a a big issue. So,
and I think we've had some really positive feedback from local residents who are really concerned and wanted to, and I'm glad that this is being made visible at the town council level, so local vegan groups and people who are really concerned about the environment. And we've had some, I would say, the usual far right sort of responses back. So from the COVID denying, it's all a government conspiracy, climate change types, a couple of those, quite interesting.
There are some other countries around the world that have jumped on this, aren't they? So yes. Who is it who else has taken up this initiative?
So I believe Buenos Aires as a city has signed up. So they're much, much, much larger than we are. So that was very recently. Also, there's a city in Florida in North America which has signed up. And then there are several Indian cities that have signed up over in Asia as well. But I think the plant-based treaty is relatively new. And so we're starting to see an acceleration. What is interesting is if you go to the website and you look at the countries there, so politicians, and look at the countries, the UK far outstrips everybody else in terms of councillors and MPs that have signed. So we're actually, as a country, leading at the moment, and that's great, so we'd like to see other countries sign up faster, but it's like something to be proud about that, we seem to be penetrating quite deep into the town councillor psyche in the UK.
So the practicalities of it, I mean, how many days are you recommending people to eat a plant-based diet?
So what we're doing at the moment is putting together a scheme for schools and business in the area to sort of call out the award system that we're looking at. During that, we'll be sort of putting into place a sort of a rating for how a school or a business rates against the sort of the initiatives that we're putting together. So we're not making an explicit statement at this point in time. I mean, ideally what we'd like to see, I guess, and this is just my own personal viewpoint, but is a balanced plant, non-plant menu at each school. So there's a good choice. So we're not denying anybody choice, but what we want to do is make sure that vegans and plant-based people have a good offering rather than say jacket potato, which is the case in some schools at the moment. So leveling the playing field in that sense would be a really good goal to set ourselves for the next year or so. And
what about meat-free Mondays? I mean, that's been going for a very long time.
Yeah,
and
I think that's a really good idea. I think that's a really good idea. That's something to encourage. I think as people learn that, hey, well, meat-free Monday was easy. And actually, there's some really good plant-based foods out there now. Well, let's do meat-based Monday and Wednesday.
Yeah.
And then Friday.
Yeah.
And you know what? From a climate change perspective, I mean, there are other arguments for plant-based, but from a climate change perspective, if you can get the population to reduce consumption by 50, 60, 70%, we've made a massive difference. So absolutely. We're not saying never. It's like, moderation. And the other thing is that then when you occasionally don't go plant-based, you're probably buying higher quality food products, which are probably better for you anyway. And so net your health, the health of the family, the health of the ecosystem, everything gets better.
And I think that's, really important that it's the health of the animals as well. So it's quite convenient to not think about it. So, I think for a lot of people, when, people say, well, if I'm going to eat anything organic, what should it be? It's like dairy. And why should it be dairy and meat organic? Because what they are fed is what you eat, eats.
Yeah.
And so we can look at organic and it's like, yes, the animals have a better way of life. But the food that they are fed is not genetically modified. It is coming from an organic farm. So when we look at the big scale of actually the food that the animals are eating, which has huge repercussions in, mainly being grown with fossil fuels. So I think there's a lot of kind of people just when they're thinking about organic, they don't really, well, why pay extra? So without being able to...
There is that. I mean, there's also this, I mean, there are several trends at the moment that I've noticed. So say, plant-based food's heavily processed, I want natural. Okay, I'm sure that's one theme that's been cultured by the meat and dairy industry. There's nothing natural about injecting animals with antibiotics to stimulate the growth. and then feeding them on soya and all these sorts of things. So, and that's the majority of the industry.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is address the majority issue at the moment. Now, there are local farmers that are grass-fed, really organic, really, but that doesn't scale to the population.
Yeah.
So we have to reduce, or it's going to be a very expensive product for, the wealthy few. And I think what we're missing is a really honest discussion about this whole area. It's like, climate change, climate crisis is upon us. We need to change our behaviours. Now, how do we want to do that in an equitable way, both from the point of view of the ecosystem, animal, welfare, and the diet of the population?
Yeah. I mean, we have to remember countries like India, which are predominantly all vegetarian.
Absolutely.
Now, if those millions and millions and more people that were eating a vegetarian diet actually moved over onto eating a Western diet, we would even in a worse state than we already are. But I think that I just would like to speak a little bit about the processed food, because yes, there is a major issue with processed vegan food. A lot of it is genetically modified. And the big, the poison cartel, Monsanto and Bayer, they are loving the plant-based diet because they are loving the idea that they can grow more GM soy and create whole new products from it. So, it's really, really worth people remembering that check that it is non-GMO. If it doesn't say, if soya doesn't say it's non-GMO, it is very highly likely to be genetically modified. So there is the education around plant-based diet. And you can have very, very, very unhealthy vegans, very, very unhealthy. Absolutely. Processed food. So I think that this part of it, that yes, I've been vegetarian for over 30 years, or more than that now. But I believe we should be talking about a whole food diet, not being a vegan or a vegetarian diet, which is highly processed.
I think though there's distraction that's going on here. So we live in a country where heart disease and obesity are the primary problems, and most of the population live on highly processed meat products. Okay, so that's the reality of where we are. And that system is destroying the climate. So that's where we are. So ideally, at the end of the day, do I want to see the end to large companies like Monsanto and all these guys, Cargill? Absolutely, for all the reasons that you state. But as an interim step, if they're nudged towards plant-based foods, because of the economic system and the consumer buying those in preference to the meat-based products, which are causing, the majority of the impact in the food system, well, that's a step which is probably, I don't like it, but it's pragmatic. It buys us more time for the bigger thing that we need to change. I think there's a problem of letting the perfect stoppers from actually pushing forwards and incrementally making the changes, because we're running out of time is the truth of the situation.
Totally. But I mean, it's very interesting to listen to people like Vandana Shiva, who has been in this world for a very, very long time, and what she has to say about it. And it's like, yes, we don't want them to then take the market share, and then all it is what we've got. So we can make a choice about what kind of plant-based diet, and really what we really want to be doing is encouraging people to make their own, because I think it's very easy to just keep on going down this plastic packaged processed vegetarian vegan food line, which has been flown from all over the world. So I am an absolute advocate. I mean, Drawdown is totally one of the best books. I have been an advocate of it for a very long time. And I think though that I'm a real realist too, that we have to look at all of it. We have to look at all sides of the story. And people say, oh, are you vegan? It's like, well, I've spent 20 years working in the Amazon. I'm not going to be saying to indigenous people, you need to go vegan.
What's happening with that question though is they're then using that response as an excuse not to change their behavior. So we're not saying that groups that live in balance with their ecosystem need to change. The people in the Amazon haven't caused the problem.
Exactly.
It's the Western capitalist system which has caused the problem. And it's a massive industry agro that's caused the problem. And that industry only exists because they're servicing the consumer. And so the Amazon people don't need to change their diet. No. But the person that asks you the question does.
But the other, I think another interesting thing which I bring up quite a lot is, the nightmare of almond milk. So
Yes.
we have all these people, oh, I'm vegan and I drink loads of almond milk. And it's like, do you know what's happening to the bees? Do you know what's happening to the water table? Do you know, it's like, actually, so it's about education as well. It's like, yes, we've absolutely got to move people.
And I think one of the problems with the world that we live in is actually that the information that we're talking about is almost deliberately abstracted away from the product that you buy. So when you go into the supermarket and you're looking to buy, I don't know, a non-dairy alternative, most people probably know that they want to do that because it's good for the environment, but probably don't know the issue with almond milk specifically.
Or soya, or and which comes back to, what are we promoting? We're promoting, number one, that people make their own oat milk. That would be the ideal case scenario. The ideal case scenario was to empower people to start actually not going down the line of processed Tetra Paks. It's not, it's an ideal world. People are not going to do it. But if we set the bar and we say, actually, in an ideal world, we are making acorn and chestnut burgers. We are processing local oats and making local oat milks, which are dispensable on tap. So that's a kind of a really good way, because otherwise I think we can blanket it and say, right, we're going to get everybody onto a plant-based diet and it doesn't matter if it's processed or not.
And I think that there's a danger there in that, again, we're running out of time. And changing several behaviors at once is exponentially harder than changing a single behavior. So I will take it if people move to buying oat milk in a Tetra Pak. That's a step forwards. Okay.
But I think when you set the goal really high and you say to people, this is what would be ideal, they're not going to make that, but they're going to come somewhere in the middle.
Take this step. And then what happens is you're buying the time to then say, well, why do you really need to buy it from this big agro? You can make it locally or from a local producer. But you then have the time, they're already on your side and they're more likely to take the next step. But the danger is if we set the thing too high right at the start, people just say, I've got a job, I'm in debt, I can't make my own, oat milk at home or whatever. It's just, I've got my energy bills to pay,
Well, in that case, they should be doing it because it's a hell of a lot cheaper to have 2 spoons of oats and some water.
I've not done the cost analysis for that one, so you call me out there.
It's very, very cheap to make your own oats and water. You're paying for the packet in the transportation. But, coming back to the actual initiative and linking up, I am very much a believer in networking and joining up initiatives that are already working, like we mentioned, Meat-Free Mondays. So I've been promoting that in schools for a long time, at least have Meat-Free Mondays. So how is the initiative working with other organizations?
So what we're doing at the moment, again, it's sort of a slow process. So the plant-based treaty signing was one step in a long journey. We're now sort of mapping out the shape of the initiatives that we want to take to schools and we went to businesses. So I've just reached out to a group of UK dietary professionals who are focused on plant-based as part of this to sort of counter and get expertise on that area. So they're actually on the plant-based site if you're interested in looking at who they are. And also, I look at it ratcheting forwards bit by bit, putting the pieces into place and moving the thing forward step by step. One of the problems is we don't have much resource. So everything we're doing is volunteer based and, everybody's got the day job. So it's going to be an initiative that runs through this year, next year, before we start sort of seeing stuff moving out in any sort of meaningful way, I think. Unless we start moving a bit faster, but
that's why I wonder, by creating a network, working with Peter and Viva and Meat-Free Mondays and the Vegetarian Association and and actually creating networks where we can get all these people together. And because this is what happens, it's like we work so hard. So I'm one of the founders of the Southeast Climate Alliance. We have 120 organizations now in it. And the main reason was we need to bring everybody that's working on climate action together so that we can all be educated about the initiatives and so we can tell the people that are following us.
So one of the things we should definitely do is have a conversation offline when we actually start moving forward again about how we hook you guys into what we're doing and perhaps replicate and talk to the local parish and town councils in the area.
Because one of the concerns is like we really were pushing for each council to declare a climate emergency.
Yep.
And yes, I think the Seeker has Southeast Climate Alliance had a part to play in pushing some councils and then showing other councils what other councils had done and their plans.
Yep.
But that's all well and good. Surrey declared a climate emergency, and then a week later they gave a fracking well permission. So it's like, yes, it's one step. They make the declaration. Then what? We've had the same with the fair trade towns. They make the declaration, but actually, how do we hold them to this, and how do we actually see how well it's working?
And I think that's a really important point. You can make the statement, and to be fair, it's a big step for some of these councillors to actually acknowledge there is a climate emergency. So the fact that I know it's unbelievable, but even so, they want to ignore it. It's like, oh well, it's we've got to sort the economy out. It's like, no. So just getting that climate emergency declaration out the door is a statement that yes, you acknowledge it now. It is important. And now this is a bar that we're going to measure things against as you go forward. So the fracking thing, will you fall below your own bar? Okay. And that feedback loop needs to be worked on all the time. And some councils will move much faster because of the makeup of the councillors in the council. Other councils find it more difficult to, to keep above that bar because of the clash between what's going on and their political sort of value system. But irrespective, ratcheting forwards, winning incremental wins and pushing the thing forwards, I think is the only way. I'd love to be, be able to snap my fingers like Thanos and change the world, but none of us can do that. It's a hard grind.
Yeah, and that's why I think we have absolutely got to start joining up a bit more. And
yes.
I've been like hardcore environmentalist solutionist for over 20 years, and I've seen all these like siloed organizations all working on their little thing. But that's not how nature works. No. We have to learn from the natural principles.
One of the things I've actually personally, one of the things I've actually personally decided to do is actually only start sponsoring charities that have themselves signed up to the plant-based treaty. So if you're a green organization, you care about climate change, how can you not sign up to the plant-based treaty if you're serious about this? So why am I going to, because I sponsor all sorts of things in the past. So actually, I'm actually focusing now, saying, no, I'm really happy to support you, but this is one of the primary damaging drivers to the planet. And you need to acknowledge that if you want me to continue the support. And it's to exactly help to coalesce all these fragmented different things. So, yeah.
And what about eco churches? Because there's quite a good eco church network. And
I wouldn't be aware of that. To be honest with you. So
that's the kind of organizations that you can get into. And actually the church is taking climate change quite seriously.
Right, so, okay.
I mean, there's the whole kind of the interfaith churches, and then there's, there's eco churches. And that would be, I'd say, a great way as well of, we need to be working, through education, whether it's through schools or religious organizations and so, how we can actually advertise it, because it's not like the council are going to do what's right and pay for advertising and social media posts and awareness and campaigns and billboards, which would be, the ideal case scenario.
All we can do is act as another seed, another trigger point, try and coordinate from our perspective and try and give a nudge. So you're exactly right. The network is really important. And part of the function over the next year or so is to build that. So I think, we need to talk further. Your hooks into the eco churches, I think, would be very interesting to some of the councillors in Haywards Heath. So, we can talk about that. And again, I'm trying to leverage out the community that's already signed up to plant-based treaty that's in the UK and work out how we leverage those skills, resources and expertise to sort of, nudge on a little bit forwards. The other thing as well I think is important is that by Haywards Heath signing, we sort of signposted the fact that, okay, we've moved, so come on, other councils around the country. And again, it's worth looking at the councillors that have signed up to plant-based treaty, because you can probably guess which town councils are going to move next based on the number of councillors they've signed.
So just before we finish here, so what are your like main short facts as why should people go plant-based?
Well, I went plant-based because I care about the future of the planet for my kids. There's nothing more important.
And why is it, as if I don't know, as if many of the listeners don't know, but actually why is it so bad to eat meat?
Because the science tells us that meat has a massive CO2 footprint. It is also massively destructive on the biosphere. And when you pull the biosphere to pieces, you're actually destroying the health systems that keep the planet healthy. We increment, it's like a big Jenga sort of game. You pull out the blocks and you can pull out a couple, but eventually the whole thing collapses. And planet Earth is the only home we have. And the ecosystem has provided us with fresh water, oxygen, and everything we've needed throughout our existence. And we're destroying that. And we're destroying that with our massive big agri, cheap meat, low quality, as well as the fossil fuel industry, of course, on the other side.
And sadly, our national parks are a really good example. And I mean, I know people down in Dartmoor, they talk about the white plague, that, our beautiful national parks, but these rolling hills full of sheep, are really detrimental. Yes, we need to have some grazing livestock. I totally agree that we need grazing livestock, but not to the density and the areas where they're not fenced off anywhere. So, it's finding a way that, so I don't believe in like no livestock at all. They have a part in the ecosystem.
So regenerative pasture and silvopasture and those sorts of techniques that need to be seriously looked at, and the acknowledgement that that will mean higher cost for that sort of food product. But ultimately, it's not higher cost if it gives us a viable planet to live on. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, thank you, Richard, so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes, I will put in the links after this. So thank you for watching.
Thank you too. Thank you for the invite. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.